A cowboy won the night's wager, an Apache beauty, yet he wanted more than her body. The dust choked the air in red rock, gulch like a noose tightening around my neck, and the saloon's lantern light flickered like the devil's own grin. I'd ridden into this god-forsaken town on a whim, chasing the ghost of a payout that might buy me a few more miles of forgetting. But as the cards slapped down on the scarred oak table, I knew this night was going to end in blood. The stakes had climbed higher than the jagged peaks, shadowing the valley gold nuggets, glinting under the smoke. Deeds to ranchers nobody wanted, and whispers of something darker. Something human, thrown in like a bad bet. I sat there, Luke Harlan, with my Colt heavy on my hip and my eyes narrowed against the haze of cigar smoke. Across from me, Black Jack, Riley sneered, his fingers twitching over his hand like a rattler coiling to strike. "You're cheating, Harlan," he growled, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd packed shoulder to shoulder in the Rusty Nail Saloon. The place reeked of whiskey and sweat, with miners, cowboys, and drifters, all leaning in, hungry for a show. Old man Whitaker, the barkeep, with a face like weathered leather, poured shots without asking, his one good eye darting between us. And then there was Sadie, the saloon gal with rouged cheeks and a laugh that could melt iron, hovering nearby like she sensed the storm brewing. I didn't cheat. Never had. But in these parts, a man's word was worth less than spit in the desert. Riley flipped his cards 3 aces, smug as sin, and the room erupted. Chairs scraped back, fists clenched, and before I could blink, his boys were drawing iron. The first shot cracked like thunder, splintering the mirror behind the bar. Glass rained down as I dove sideways, my own revolver barking in response. Bullets whined past my ear, thudding into wood and flesh alike. I rolled behind an overturned table, heart pounding like a war drum from those damn Civil War days I'd tried so hard to bury. Riley's man went down first, clutching his gut, blood pooling on the sawdust floor. Another caught a slug in the shoulder, howling as he crashed into the piano, keys jangling in discord. I fired again, dropping Riley himself with a clean shot to the chest. He slumped forward, cards scattering like fallen leaves. The crowd scattered too, some cheering, others cursing, but the fight wasn't over. 2 more outlaws lunged from the shadows, guns blazing. I felt the burn of a graze on my arm, hot and sharp, but I didn't flinch. Not with the memories flooding back my sister, Eliza, screaming as those Confederate raiders dragged her away during the siege on our family farm. I'd been too young, too weak then. Not anymore. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay sprawled in the dim light, and the saloon fell into a stunned hush. Whitaker wiped his hands on his apron, muttering, "Damn fool game," while Sadie fanned herself, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. "You won, Harlan," Riley's surviving crony spat, backing toward the swinging doors. "Take your prize, the prize." God help me, it wasn't the gold or the land deeds piled on the table. No, they dragged her in from the back room, a captive Apache woman, wrists bound tight with rawhide, her long black hair matted with dust and blood from whatever hell she'd been through. She was young, maybe 20, with skin like burnished copper and eyes that burned fiercer than any campfire I'd ever stared into. The Roughnecks-town thugs, like Billy Thorne, with his scarred knuckles and leering grin, shoved her forward, treating her like a sack of flour won in a raffle. "Apache beauty," Thorne chuckled, his voice slurred from too much rock gut. "Caught her scouting near the ridge after we scattered her kin. She's yours now, Harlan." break her in good. The crowd hooted, expecting the usual me, claiming her roughly, dragging her off like some frontier conquest. But as I stood there, blood dripping from my grazed arm, something twisted in my gut. Those eyes of hers, defiant, unbroken, yet shadowed with a pain I knew too well. It hit me like a mule kick. She reminded me of Eliza, not in looks, but in that unyielding spirit, the way she'd fight even when the world had her cornered. My hands trembled, not from the fight, but from the weight of it or the war scars on my soul, the nightmares of Eliza's pleas echoing in my head. I'd drifted these badlands for years, numb to everything but the next trail, the next bottle to drown the guilt. Survival was all I had left. But owning another soul, that wasn't survival. That was damnation. I pulled my knife slow, the blade catching the lantern's glow, and stepped toward her. She stiffened, chin lifting in challenge, expecting the worst. The room went quiet, even Sadie holding her breath. Thorn grinned wider, thinking I was about to cut her clothes or some such barbarity. Instead, I sliced through the ropes, the frayed ends dropping to the floor like shed snakeskin. "No man owns another soul," I said, my voice gravelly from disuse and dust. "Not on my watch." Murmurs rippled through the saloon, some calling me a fool, others a traitor for spurning the reward. Whitaker shook his head, muttering about soft-hearted drifters, while Sadie slipped me a sympathetic glance, her hand brushing my arm as if to say she understood. Thorn spat on the floor. "You're making a mistake, Harlan. She slit your throat first chance she gets." Maybe she would. But as I offered her my flask of water instead of chains, her fingers brushed mine, hesitant, like testing a live wire. She drank deep, eyes never leaving my face, and in that moment a spark ignited something raw, unspoken, that made my chest tighten. Who was she? What horrors had she endured? And why the hell did freeing her feel like the first right thing I'd done since the war? We slipped out into the cool night air before dawn broke, the stars still pinning the sky like silver bullets. I saddled my horse, Rusty, a loyal bay gelding who'd carried me through more scrapes than I could count. She trailed silently behind, her bare feet padding on the hard-packed earth, testing if this freedom was just another trap. I didn't force her to mount up. Hell, I half expected her to bolt into the shadows, but she didn't. Maybe she knew the patrols and bounty hunters prowling these parts would hunt her down like prey. Or maybe, just maybe, she saw something in me worth the risk. As we rode into the arid badlands, the sun cresting the horizon like a bloody promise, I glanced back. Her name, I didn't know it yet, was Kaya, though I'd learn it later, whispered like a secret wind. She sat behind me on Rusty, her body rigid, not touching more than necessary. The wind whipped her hair, and I caught the scent of sage and something wilder, untamed. My mind raced with questions. Why her? Why now? The pull in my chest was unfamiliar, a mix of protectiveness and something deeper, stirring emotions I'd buried with Eliza. Was it pity, guilt, or the first flicker of a connection that could thaw the ice around my heart? Our first camp came under a jagged mesa, the rock face casting long shadows as the sun dipped low. I built a small fire, the crackle of dry wood the only sound breaking the silence. I shared dried venison from my saddlebags, tearing off a strip and holding it out. She took it warily, her body language screaming mistrust shoulders, hunched eyes darting like a cornered wolf. I didn't blame her. After what those raiders had done to her village, scattering her kin like dust in the wind. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. As we ate, my thoughts wandered back to Eliza. She'd been all I had left after Pa died in the fields and Ma wasted away from fever. During the war, when those raiders hit our farm, I'd hidden like a coward, watching from the barn as they took her. Her screams haunted me still, a ghost that rode shotgun on every trail. Vowing silently not to repeat that history, I watched Kaya chew slowly, her profile etched in firelight. She was beautiful, in a fierce, unbroken way-high cheekbones, full lips pressed thin against the pain. But it wasn't her body that drew me. It was the fire in her soul, mirroring the one I'd lost in myself.